Welcome back, Resident Evil fans. So since Resident Evil 9 was revealed, I decided to revisit Resident Evil 8. After playing through it, I realized a few things. Resident Evil Village is a disgusting but gorgeous roller coaster of horror. And for all of those unforgettable moments that it leaves you with, there's just some moments that fall flat, leave you scratching your head. Why on earth did this happen in this game? What's the point? For today, we are going to count down the 5 worst and best moments that happen in Resident Evil Village. And we're going to start with the worst and work our way to the best. So stick around and let's dive into the mold. Starting off with the 5 worst things about Resident Evil Village, number 5 is going to be Ethan Winters still feels kind of just meh. Like he's not really developed. Despite being the main protagonist for 2 entire games, he still feels like the least developed lead character in the Resident Evil franchise. He doesn't have Leon's charisma or even Chris's boulder punching bravado that we saw in Resident Evil 5. And even when he's dealing with all this insane trauma that he's put through, I mean, he had his hand sawed off and he had it cut off by Lady Dimitrescu. Now he's technically not human. But Ethan reacts with such just bland disbelief, and his delivery is just not there. The disconnect kind of breaks the immersion of the game. And I think we all know that horror works best when you feel for the character. And Ethan's lack of personality just kind of makes it hard to even care about the journey, even when the stakes are high. So moving on to number 4, the game rushes you. Resident Evil should be known for its tension, building dread through exploration, and its pacing of its story. But Resident Evil Village often pushes you through its storyline just a little too quickly. After Castle Dimitrescu, the game kind of barrels you forward. So if you're talking about Beneviento and Moreau's areas, they're really short, mostly linear. You don't have to do a whole lot, and then the boss fights kind of fall flat. Heisenberg's factory is a lot longer than the 2 previous areas, but even then, it's just a constant sense that you're being shoved down a narrative corridor. There's little breathing room to explore or reflect. Just when an area starts to kind of get interesting, it's over and something is pushing you into the next part. That rapid pacing kind of weakens the impact of some of these locations that should be offering great horror moments, and it just doesn't deliver. So following that up with number 3, Beneviento and Moreau felt shallow. House Beneviento had one of the game's, honestly, probably the most terrifying moments, the stupid giant baby monster chase. It's brilliant psychological horror, but after the baby monster, the shock kind of wears off and you realize there's not even a real boss fight. It's a lame game of hide and seek with a doll. And for Moreau, his swamp section is short. You just jump across some buildings, across this lake. And then the boss fight, it's just a slugfest with a transformed Moreau. It's clearly meant to be tragic, showing that he's a failed experiment and all he wants is acceptance, and he's craving it. But you don't really spend any time with him to actually feel anything or understand why it's even necessary. These 2 lords really deserved deeper gameplay, even more lore, and honestly better pacing compared to the castle and the factory. They just seemed way too short and not thought out. Now moving on to number 2, which honestly for me I almost put as the number 1 worst thing for this game, but it's going to come in at number 2. The Duke. He's a very weird downgrade, and he could have been incredible. He's presented this mysterious, omnipresent, possibly supernatural character, but instead of developing his backstory, the game just doesn't do anything with him. He literally just exists to sell weapons, make some awkward jokes, and kind of give you a backstory as to what's going on with these lords. He even quotes the merchant from Resident Evil 4, and it ends up making you miss that merchant even more. By the end of the game, you still know nothing about him, and his role feels more mechanical than meaningful. They honestly should have gave more backstory and more lore about the Duke, because he could have been such an interesting character. Finally, for the worst thing about Resident Evil Village, It's the final boss fight with Mother Miranda. After fighting through these twisted lords that she gave supernatural powers to, uncovering some truths about Ethan, and then facing these super emotional stakes tied to his daughter and his wife, you'd kind of expect the final boss fight to deliver some climactic bang. But Mother Miranda's battle, it just feels very basic and honestly kind of rushed. It is flashy, but it's not really that engaging. There's no major twist. It's just shooting and dodging, and she goes through a few basic transformations. But for a character that was hyped as the mastermind behind absolutely everything, she goes down kind of easy, and it ends the game on a really flat note. So I think they could have put a lot more work behind this battle with Mother Miranda and even her character as a whole. But because of that, that's my number one worst thing about Resident Evil Village. Now that we've been through the top 5 worst things about Resident Evil Village, let's talk about what it does right, because some of these things they did very, very well. Moving into the 5 best things about Resident Evil Village, we start with number 5. It's varied environments and really unique tones. One of Resident Evil Village's biggest strengths is how it shifts the horror style with each new area. It's not just the same thing throughout the entire game. So Castle Dimitrescu is this classic gothic horror with an enemy that just stalks you throughout the entire time you're there. But then House Beneviento delivers this like surreal psychological scare, from the baby monster to playing off the real fear of dolls. And then you move into Moreau's Reservoir, and it's about this grotesque body horror to where this person just doesn't feel accepted in life. And finally, you see Heisenberg's Factory. It's a grim industrial sci-fi type area, and the creatures and the atmosphere of this environment is just completely different. And each domain feels like its own little horror short film, and the variety kept the game fresh. And each section is memorable, but some of the gameplay for these areas do fall short, and I feel like they could have extended on it just a little bit. Moving on to number 4, we have Lady Dimitrescu and her castle. So let's be completely honest here. Lady Dimitrescu is the real icon of Resident Evil Village. Honestly, when it was first coming out, I thought she was going to be the main boss, because she dominated the trailers, the memes. She was on everybody's social feed for months, and it's because she delivered for her part of the game. Her castle is pure Resident Evil nostalgia. All your basic locked doors, secret passages, and then a towering stalker who shows up when you really least want her to. She's both elegant and truly terrifying. The section of the game is the most complete and well-paced part. She kind of deserved to be in it longer because she was so hyped up. But for the time that she was in the game, she owned every bit of it. For number 3 on our list, we have the incredible visual design and the atmosphere that Resident Evil Village has to offer. From these fog-covered forests to snow-draped villages, even the candlelit castle, Resident Evil Village is honestly a masterpiece. The Resident Evil engine continues to impress, and Capcom's art direction, it really does hit a home run. Even when the story or the gameplay are kind of wavers and isn't the best, the atmosphere does keep you invested. Every monster, every hallway, it all tells a story. You can feel the cold, the rot, the dread. And it's one of the best looking horror games that we've seen in a very long time. Moving on to number 2 of the best things about Resident Evil Village, it's the balance of action and horror. So Resident Evil has struggled in the past with some of the games to find the right mix of horror and action. Sometimes it's just a little over the top, or the horror is not really there. But Resident Evil Village strikes this best balance that we've seen since Resident Evil 4. There's still tension. You're still going to be scared because the horror sometimes comes out of nowhere. And they do a good job giving you your arsenal as you go. You have better mobility, the combat controls are more improved, and it just feels empowering but terrifying at the same time. And Capcom really nailed the balance of action and horror with this game. And finally, for the number 1 best thing about Resident Evil Village, it's just the enemy and the creature design. So the monsters in Resident Evil Village are absolutely top tier. From the feral, intelligent Lycans to the really just grotesque bosses like Moreau's fish form, or even Heisenberg's mad machinery. Every enemy feels very unique and handcrafted. Even the standard grunts. They're fun to fight, unsettling to look at, and the variety just keeps you wanting to see more, see what else is being introduced into this world. And it just reinforces this twisted world that you're trapped in. Resident Evil has always had great monsters, but sometimes they've kind of fell flat. Resident Evil Village might be the most visually creative entry in the entire franchise that we've seen. Resident Evil Village is a beautiful mess. It has incredible highs, such as the atmosphere, the design, the variety of the game. But it also stumbles just as hard in some areas. The pacing of the game, the character work, and even the narrative payoff. But it's also one of the most ambitious, stylish, and entertaining horror games that we've seen in a long time. What were your favorite and least favorite moments from Resident Evil Village? How does my list compare to yours? Do you think there's anything on my list that shouldn't have been there? Maybe there's something that should have been there. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, turn on notifications so you catch every video that I upload, and I will catch you in the next one.